This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, News-Free Dixie for the 21st century.
And that was my great friend and We All Be Radio favorite, Timberwolf, with Think for Yourself, especially when it comes to these election issues. Please think for yourself, educate yourself as well. Also, if you need some more information on information, check us out at www.weallbe.blogspot.com. That's www.weallbe.blogspot.com. And since coming up on Dr. King's birthday and celebration, national holiday celebration, I'm currently reading Martin Luther King Jr.'s Why We Can't Wait. I suggest that everybody out here listening to this show pick up the book Why We Can't Wait by the late great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., written and published back in 1964. I'd like to read a passage out of here before we get to Cynthia McKinney. She's coming up, everybody. But this is what Dr. King said in Why We Can't Wait under the chapter, The Sword That Heals. Negroes are human, not superhuman. Like all people, they have differing personalities, diverse financial interests, and varied aspirations. There are Negroes who will never fight for freedom. There are Negroes who will seek profit for themselves alone from the struggle. There are even some Negroes who will cooperate with their oppressors. These facts should distress no one. Every minority and every people has its share of opportunists, profiteers, freeloaders, and escapists. The hammer blows of discrimination, poverty, and segregation must warp and corrupt some. No one can pretend that because a people may be oppressed, every individual member is virtuous and worthy. The real issue is whether in the great mass, the dominant characteristics are decency, honor, and courage. And that's from Why We Can't Wait by the late, great Dr. King. Please pick up that book and read it, because I think we'll need it. If you're really about change, and everybody coming there for change, please do something different than what you was doing before. And speaking of change, I'd like to introduce a change agent. Finally, everybody, Cynthia McKinney on We All Be Radio. Thanks for listening. Please spread this interview and spread this listenership up for We All Be Radio. Take care, hold on, and keep the faith. We All Be Radio has the honor and privilege to welcome one of the leading lights of our generation, of this new century, one-time Democratic representative from the state of Georgia, one of the greatest black people we ever sent to Congress, subject of the great documentary American Blackout, which deals with the election process in the states as well as cover-up and conspiracy on our government, one of the true torchbearers of black liberation in this country and beyond, Green Party presidential candidate for 2008. We'd just like to welcome Sister Cynthia McKinney on the air.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you. I think this is a very special time for our people, a very special time for our community and our country. This is a time when we've got to really, I believe, do something different in order to get something different. You talked about my experience in the civil rights movement and as a fighter for the people, but I can tell you that with the statistics that reflect the state of black America from reports that have been done by Hull House, Loyola University, Harvard University, Kaiser Family Foundation, the New York Times has produced reports of some studies that they have done. Of course, United for a Fair Economy every year on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday produces their State of the Dream report. We've got the National Urban League's State of Black America report, which is produced every year. And then we've got a report that was done by Dr. David Satcher that found that over 83,000 black people died prematurely for no other reason than that they were black. And so in all of these studies, what we see is that there is a community in the United States that is in pain, that is suffering, and that the political process is not addressing that pain and is not addressing that suffering. There are remedies. There are options available, and those options are available from the political process. We have to have strong affirmative action programs that target people who are in need. We can't have them, though, if we don't press for them, if we don't press the political will in order to make this happen, to make these changes that are necessary in public policy happen. And so that's why I've decided to ask people to at least explore the idea of doing something different in order to get something different. It's high time that the votes of blacks in this country were not just not taken for granted, but that were counted, that were treated with dignity, treated with respect. But we saw what happened in Florida of 2000, where black voters went to the polls in record numbers. They cast their votes, those who were fortunate enough to be able to get past the roadblocks and all of the other interference, the construction of a convicted felons list in order to keep them out of the voting booth. Those who actually got there, then unfortunately, approximately in Florida alone, there were approximately 80,000 black voters who went to the polls, they voted, and their votes weren't counted. 1 million black people did this across the country in the 2000 election, and nobody who fought for them, who paid the price, where's the justice for the purposeful obstruction of the black vote in 2000? And then again in 2004, we know from the work that basically the leadership of the Green Party did and financed by individual donors who really wanted to know what the heck happened in Ohio. We have the story now, and it's depicted on in the film American Blackout of what happened in Ohio 2004. And again, it was the black vote that was targeted. And so I believe that it's time for us to do something different in order to have something different, in order to get the public policies that can address the disparities and that still continue to plague our country and our community, to address the pain and the suffering that exists in our community, to address all of those inequalities. We've got to do something. And unfortunately, in some regards, this might be our last opportunity to really do something. With the advent of electronic voting machines now, we're looking at what's happening in the streets of Kenya, literally right now, where, thank goodness, the European election observers were there, and they were able to call clearly early on that the election was not fair and transparent. And we've got our former president of our own country, Jimmy Carter, who through the Carter Center has done election monitoring, has already said that we don't have the right stuff in this country to carry on a free, fair, open, transparent elections. So if with these electronic voting machines that are able to obscure the true election results, even more so than what we as a community have experienced all the time, then we really are in a precarious position in this country. And therefore, I ask that people who normally don't get involved in politics, please do get involved this time. And to research all of the candidacies, the parties, the platforms of the parties very carefully. But then participate.
I definitely agree with you, everything you said. But I always get your point, because I know that you know better than a lot of people because of things you have endured over the last 3 or 4 years. Do you feel that the Democratic Party have basically, outlandish usefulness for the black community? Like, you really think that the Democratic Party at this point in the game represents the needs of the black people in this country?
Well, I think it's very clear that what has happened with the erosion of the quality of life being experienced by blacks in this country, as reflected in the statistics. Mm-hmm. For example, the New York Times ran a story not too long ago saying that nearly 50% of all of the black men between the ages of 16 and 64 in New York City were unemployed. That reflects a crisis. Mm-hmm. But what was the response to the announcement? When the article ran, what was the public policy response to provide for jobs for these men and young men who will become fathers and stakeholders in families? There was no public policy implemented to correct that situation. That's Democrats and Republicans who have a responsibility to try and change the conditions once they become known. Now, of course, when you don't know what the conditions are, then, of course, it's very difficult to try and get people to do things when there's lack of information. But we don't have a lack of information. Mm-hmm. For example, when it comes to home ownership, United for a Fair Economy has told us that it would take 1,600 years to close the racial disparity between home ownership rates for black people and white people if nothing else is done in public policy to change the policy. That's begging for a change in public policy when it comes to home ownership, to make home ownership more possible to more people and to people of color. Or, for example, when they say that the wealth gap, United for a Fair Economy again talks about the wealth gap, right, and 580 years to close the wealth gap in this country. That means that something must be done. And that's why I've talked about instituting a livable wage, not just increasing the minimum wage. Again, United for a Fair Economy tells us that you could increase the minimum wage 70 cents each year for the next few years, and you would still have a family of 4 living in poverty, beneath the poverty level. So increasing the minimum wage is not enough. Right. We have to do more. And it was Loyola University in their Hull House report that said that for black people in Chicago to catch up to the quality of life enjoyed by whites in Chicago, it would take 200 years if there were no changes in public policy. Well, we can't wait 200 years. We can't wait 1,000 years. We can't wait. And we shouldn't be asked to wait for fairness, for equality, for justice. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't be asked to wait. But at the same time, we shouldn't accept waiting. So now why is it that we accept the wait? We continue to do things that we've always done and expect to get a different result. That's, in fact, United for a Fair Economy said that even though black voters vote blue, meaning vote Democratic, right, they increasingly are in the red. And so if we continue to do what we've always done, we will stay in the red. And staying in the red is not acceptable for any one community in this country. It's not acceptable. When I can drive through Dallas, Texas, and see the amount of wealth that I see just driving through on the expressway,
Mm-hmm.
The amount of wealth in New York City, the amount of wealth all over this country, the kind of poverty that exists, the kind of hunger that exists in this country, the statistics of people dying prematurely, is totally unacceptable. It's unacceptable for me, and I would hope that it would be unacceptable enough for enough people to say, no, I am not going to be apathetic. No, I am not going to lose faith and confidence in myself. Yes, I'm going to get involved. Yes, I'm going to get active. Yes, I'm going to educate myself, and I'm going to participate in the political system and demand that the political system give me something different.
I just guess people, interest. I mean, I know that you know what it takes to really try to motivate people and the challenges that it partakes in. I was just thinking about Frederick Douglass when you were saying all that when he said that it's easier to raise strong children than it is to repair broken men. And there's a lot of broken people around, I guess, broken in spirit and whatnot. And like you were talking about access to the media. And I want to know, too, do you feel like the media has improved since the last election as far as coverage of the candidates, or you think it's gotten worse?
Oh, I think it's really clear that people are resorting to what are now called alternative forms of media, but the alternative is becoming more mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
The alternative is becoming mainstream because the mainstream is not serving the needs of the people. It was that so-called mainstream media that accepted the lies from this administration and put this country and helped to hype this country into war.
Mm-hmm.
It's that same mainstream media that is failing to ask the questions about the truth of what happened on September 11th. It is the same mainstream media that would rather have communities of color laughing at themselves
mm-hmm.
and listening to music that denigrates them rather than looking at television programs that educate and inform them, even at the same time as entertaining them, and listening to music that uplifts them and helps to create a movement. So I just recently read a story about the declining readership
mm-hmm.
of the top 10 newspapers in this country. And some of them have shrunk considerably. And there was also another article about the Washington Post seeing itself in a different light rather than just as a newspaper company.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we will see is a transformation of the sources that people use to acquire information, because the so-called mainstream corporate controlled media class have been so unresponsive and to the needs of the populace and have outright manipulated them. I just spent the better part of this morning reading the transcript, the testimony of Bill Schaap, who was with Covert Quarterly, has done some wonderful, wonderful work, he and his wife. And he testified at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. trial that was held in Tennessee back in 1999. He talked about the disinformation campaign that was run against Martin Luther King Jr. And he listed the names of the newspapers that ran stories that had really been planted by, and in some cases even written by, the FBI.
Mm.
They were the Atlanta Constitution, the New Orleans Times-Picayune, the Washington Post, the New York Times. These were the newspapers that ran stories that discredited Dr. King, and all the way up to his murder, and then even afterwards. So if these newspapers would cooperate with criminal activity, because it was Frank Church who said that it was that the COINTELPRO documents revealed illegal and un-American activities. But if the mainstream media would cooperate with the government in illegal and un-American activities with respect to quashing dissent in our country, and even in the murder of individuals like Dr. King, like Fred Hampton, then what would they do today? What will they not do? We have history as our guide.
Right. Ms. McKinney?
Yes?
Oh, I was making sure you were finished. I was just thinking about what you were saying, and what popped in my mind when you speaking about history, I'm thinking about the Spanish-American War of the late 19th century, where, William Randolph Hearst basically created this thing called yellow journalism. And now they call it COINTELPRO, like you say, but why do we still, I just look at the Agenda 6 story, for example. Like, it was the foreign media that actually got a hold of the story and really, broadcast across the world, the BBC and institutions like that. And yet we as Americans, particularly black Americans, we're still waiting for the CNNs and the MSNBCs and all these other news outlets to come around. And they're not really reporting about what's going on in general right now, but there is a lot of things going on still. But yet, we like, if we don't see it on the screen, we don't see it on our TV set, that it doesn't really matter anymore. It's not a part of our world.
We have to throw that kind of thinking away. And so then that means that we have to hold the hands of our neighbors, still believe that they can get the unbridled truth from the mainstream media, and just help them to understand and show them the documentation. It's there on the internet, the website with this testimony from the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. trial. And the thing that was so interesting to me was that all of those institutions of journalism that were named back then and that cooperated with the telling of these lies exist today. I'm going to get the Augusta Chronicle, the Atlanta Constitution, U.S. News and World Report, New York Daily News, Washington Post, Christian Science Monitor, New York Times, New Orleans Times-Picayune, St. Louis Globe Democrat, United Press International. And when you talk about the international press, well, I just happened to be in West Virginia with Megan Williams, and there it was the French press. It was the international press that was there. They were there. There was the locals came, but the locals came with an idea of trying to sow division in the black community as to how to appropriately respond to what had happened to Megan Williams. Those were the types of questions that were asked of me by the local press, whereas the international press was more concerned about the human rights situation in the United States. They were more concerned about the verities of life that are experienced by people the unfortunate in this country, as they saw what happened with Hurricane Katrina. And so now the lie that we don't have unfortunates in our society, that we have overcome racial problems, has been put to the world as just what that is. It's not the truth. And so the international press now do come when these incidents are put forward. And I'm glad that they do come. I remember during Hurricane Katrina that it was Associated Press that had the photograph of the people wading in the water carrying food, and they were looting.
Right.
But it was Agence France-Presse, the French press, who also had a picture of people wading in the water who were not dark-skinned, and they were finding food. So Associated Press played a part of the game. And when people believe what they see and don't question what is projected to them, then they become a part of the game. They become a player in the game. We don't need to have any games played on us. The role of the media ought to be to distill the truth. And then leave it up to the American people to decide one way or another. But that decision is based on the facts. We've not gotten the facts. We don't get the facts. And therefore, that's why confidence in journalism is dwindling. The viewership of these shows is dwindling, and the readership in these newspapers is dwindling.
I mean, that's true, because I know I went to an event. I covered, I freelanced for the Memphis Tri-State Defender, and I covered an event. It's a big thing to do about the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, about the control of the museum from the grassroots activists who helped start the museum. I feel like that the board at the National Civil Rights Museum is not representative of the community.
Yes, I've been following somewhat.
Yeah, I know, and it was Associated Press people, and I ain't gonna never forget this, because soon as one of the speakers were introduced, they started swearing and said, "We got to leave now," and the thing wasn't anywhere far from over, and they was underestimated how many people was actually at the event. And I caught them. I started laughing with two white guys. And then they said, "Oh, how you doing? My name is so-and-so. I'm with the Associated Press." The other guy said he's with the Memphis Media Association. And I kept on telling myself, these are the people that people going to be looking in the Sunday newspaper and saying, okay, this must be the truth.
That's exactly right.
This type of mentality, it's like, you transport yourself to Emmett Till trial or something.
That's exactly.
And this is the mentality of the people that you're dealing with, and yet you expect you people to tell you the truth. Like I remember when I first heard about you 5 years ago, I was looking at C-SPAN like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're at a rally in D.C., and you just caught my imagination, because I was looking for a person like you. I thought the people like you weren't around anymore. They got rid of them.
Yeah, they
trying to get rid of them. But I got this thing. I always look at the fact that when the news always makes somebody dead, they must be doing something right. But they go out their way to really demonize a person. Like I look at the fact they demonized Michael Jackson. He had the Pope. He was this honorary guy, but he was moving people around like it was the Witness Protection Program when it came to the molestation stuff.
Yeah.
And Mike, I don't know what it is, but I remember Tremaine Jackson's on Larry King show, like the day after he, got the court case. He said that Michael Jackson had a master bedroom that was 5,000 square feet. I said, 5,000 square feet? I can't imagine how big that bed is, but then you got to start thinking about the fact that, Make-A-Wish and all these other organizations kept on giving them kids. Yeah, parents keep on leaving kids at his ranch. I mean, right. There's a lot of people guilty here besides just Michael if he did anything at all. But I guess people, what is wrong with our public? Why are we not smart and more critical about the things that come across our TV screen or we hear on the radio?
Well, I've been traveling around the country now, and I can tell you that there are a lot more people who get it than there used to be. Mm-hmm. Now, is that enough? I'm hoping that will be enough, for example, to institutionalize a third party in this country. It only takes 5%. It doesn't take a whole lot of people.
Right.
But it just takes enough people who have their eyes open, who understand that we've got to do something different. And, my parents left a movement for me to be a participant of. And my parents worked very hard to make sure that I had a conscience, that I was aware of what was going on in my community, my country, my world, and that I bore some sense of responsibility for the conditions that other people had to face. Now, unfortunately, 2 generations later, I can't say that my generation has done for the succeeding generation what my parents did for me and for my whole entire generation. So hopefully we will be able to spark the kind of attention that will attract particularly young people and give them something to hold on to. If we are able to do that, and if we are successful, then it's something that our country desperately needs, but it's also something that our community and that our young people need. Because at the same time that I see so much talent with our young people, I've been to a couple of spoken word places, and there's an awful lot of talent, and how to channel that talent into expanding opportunities. The opportunities for success shouldn't be constricted by practice or social practice or governmental intrusion into law. The laws ought to be to liberate us, and to liberate us even from social practice. That's why the Civil Rights Act is so important. Voting Rights Act is so important. But as we got the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act that put particular forms of affirmative action in place into the law, we had the Bakke decision that came. The Civil Rights Act was just passed in 1964. And then in 1973, we had the Bakke decision overturning a certain aspect of the gains of civil rights that we had made. And then after that, we had Croson and Attn, and then, the various law school admissions, black schools, general, the right of historically black colleges and universities to remain black. Series of lawsuits, and then, of course, my own lawsuit that went all the way up to the Supreme Court just to dismantle the district that I represented, but that was back in 1996, and the district was dismantled. So we had the Voting Rights Act passed into law in 1965, and then 30 years later we had the Supreme Court basically in Shaw v. Reno and then in Johnson v. Miller, which was my case, say that not only was it illegal and to draw minority opportunity districts that looked funny, that was Shaw v. Reno, but the Johnson v. Miller case said that the Department of Justice, the voting rights section of the Civil Rights Division, couldn't even enforce the Voting Rights Act because they were about to turn the Voting Rights Act on its head, and that was with the vote of Clarence Thomas. So there's a whole lot of different levels of messages that our community needs to receive. And I think it was Sharpton who said something like, those who are skin to us ain't necessarily kin to us, something like that. Right. So we've got now, I uncovered a document dated May 11th, 1965, where the CIA talked about finding a Negro who was clean, who could step into the vacuum and chaos once Dr. King is either exposed or assassinated. And you could say that the powers that be have been very successful in finding clean Negroes. They've got Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court bench, and we played a role in saying that that was okay for
Right.
him to take the seat of Thurgood Marshall, and he doesn't even believe in the Voting Rights Act. We've got Condoleezza Rice operating on the international stage, giving the impression to all of the world that she represents Black America.
Right.
And there were some of us, even those civil rights veterans, who testified to give her that spot, to let that happen. So we've got to reach a new perception about politics and the role, our very strategic role that we can play in the future politics of this country. But we can understand it, we can study it, but in the end we have to do it. That means we have to run for office. We have to get down and get involved in it. We have to do more than just vote. And then when we do vote, we have to cast an informed vote.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with everything you said on that. I just think it's interesting that you look at hip-hop. You know, the hip-hop we see on TV, that's what corporate America wants you to have in the first place and what the world to know about. But if you look at hip-hop on a local scene, whatever you go, whether you be in Houston or in Atlanta or Memphis or anywhere, it's still got some local culture to it. And I think it's funny how, as you know from your experiences, you know Tupac's mom very well, and the things you have tried to done to show some light on these things, that COINTELPRO is definitely alive in the hip-hop culture.
Yes, absolutely. And we have to understand that. So the only way we can really understand that is to understand COINTELPRO.
Mm-hmm.
So then we learn how to read these newspaper articles. We learn how to view what we see on television. And that's why exactly I was going back and rereading the transcript from the December 1999 trial, the section that discusses the FBI's use of the media to discredit King. Because when we see what they did then, we can understand what they're doing now.
I do agree, and also I think we got to change our, I was talking to some veterans and whatnot, and a lot of them kind of disillusioned about how the way the things turned out. And I think what we're missing, when I heard Magic Johnson speak, he was a recipient of the Freedom Awards at the National Civil Rights Museum back in October. He was saying, yes, we do have more black millionaires than we did back in 1960, but we had more black businesses. And that was the key. I mean, you look at the movement, you look at the history of Mississippi. I'm thinking about Dr. T.R.M. Howard. Or you look at Birmingham, you think about A.G. Gaston. These guys had businesses. They was wealthy. They was independently wealthy from the white infrastructure. And they was able to do some things locally to help bring, pressure from the powers that be. Like A.G. Gaston was helping Dr. King get out of jail. And, he put him up in his hotels and whatnot. But a lot of these people were doing things behind the scenes. But I think our problem is I know you talked with Brother Edie on his show about, I think we the only community that let everybody exploit us. Jewish people do business with Jewish people. They do business with people that do business with them. And it's like every other group of people do that, but yet we the only group of people that don't get it still. Like, we don't know how it is to stick together. We still got this, you think about Condoleezza Rice. That's really a lot of our definition of success, the individual versus the community success. If you can't go to a certain place and not feel safe in your community, that means you're not doing a good job. That means you're not really successful because you don't have any peace of mind. And
if 50% of your children are not graduating from high school, then we have to reassess our definition of affluence. You can't have affluence when your children aren't graduating from high school. Yet there's this mainstream media thrust into making certain black communities in this country feel that they are affluent in the midst of some real failings, like graduating our kids. So we shouldn't be surprised at the interest that certain entities have taken, law enforcement has taken with respect to hip-hop icons and the surveillance that's going on. That's been admitted to by the Miami Police Department, NYPD, I think Los Angeles as well has admitted to some of that. And so because that's the cultural icons have the ability to draw not hundreds of people, but thousands, millions of people. In fact, Tupac said that he was going to march his 6 million fans on Capitol Hill, on Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the kind of pressure that could be exerted by our hip-hop stars, no wonder there's an awful lot of effort going into keeping them non-political, keeping close tabs on them and watching what they do, because the moment they would become political, it could become problematic for the powers that be.
Definitely. I also like to speak of political. I know people looking at your candidacy. Congratulations once again on your candidacy. I think you're very well qualified, and people should give you a look. I mean, regardless how they may feel about you, they should respect the fact to know that you really care about the term public servant, that you are a true public servant of the people and all people as well around the world. I'd like to get your opinion on this. Like, what if people look at your candidacy as a way to siphon votes from Barack Obama? You know, kind of like the Ralph Nader thing, where Ralph Nader ran and he took votes from Al Gore, supposedly. How do you feel when people might perceive your candidacy as that? That
issue comes up a lot because people would rather believe the hype than to trust the facts.
Mm-hmm.
The facts are that 1 million black people, well, the first fact is that George Bush did not win the election, period, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
He certainly didn't win the election by 537 votes. 1 million black people went to the polls and voted, and their votes weren't counted.
Right.
Now, if their votes had been counted, if someone had stood up and said, well, just recount all of the votes in Florida. If you didn't want to do nationwide, since Florida was the battleground state,
mm-hmm.
at least just recount all of the votes in Florida. Then the outcome would have been vastly different, because you had about 78,000 blacks who voted in Florida whose votes were not counted. So in the absence of integrity in the system for black voters, no one can say that Ralph Nader, Green Party, spoiled the election. The spoilers of the election were the people who didn't fight for the integrity of the votes, of the black people who went to the polls and voted.
Mm-hmm.
The spoilers of the election were the people who conspired to construct the convicted felons list, and you know this story because you've seen the film American Blackout.
Yes, ma'am.
And they were not punished. What they did was illegal, and they were not punished. Those people were the ones who spoiled the election.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not somebody who participates in the process, who provides choice for voters. How can anyone ever say that that person spoiled the election and spoiled our democracy?
I think people don't want to, in this society, don't want to be accountable for anything.
Well, of course.
We want to hold other people accountable, but we don't hold ourselves accountable by electing the right people to represent us.
Well, that's true as well. And you know, the accountability would have to go to the Republicans,
mm-hmm.
who put, for example, the convicted felons list together, and that was illegally constructed. The Democrats, who didn't fight for the integrity of the vote, the victory that the voters gave them, They have to be held accountable too. Hold the entire system accountable for what happened, the massive failure that happened that we call an election in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And then again in 2004 with the, as you saw in the film American Blackout, with the placement of the voting machines.
Right.
And the deliberate construction of waiting periods of up to 4 and 5 hours for black people to go vote so that they wouldn't vote. So those are the real spoilers, and I'm happy to talk about spoilers, but I certainly don't think that people who participate in the process, honestly, could ever be considered spoilers.
I definitely don't consider you a spoiler. I just think it's unfortunate. The climate of our country is like, it's weird to me. Like, even with Al Gore, you know, he was too smart for his own good. You know, he won a Nobel Prize recently. We don't like smart people. We don't like intellectual people. We don't like thoughtful people for some reason. We don't like people that know how to put together a foreign policy, per se. Like, we don't like people that's well-traveled and well-versed and understand the ins and outs, not only of America, but how the way the world works. We don't like people like you necessarily. We don't like to support people like you.
Yeah.
We don't really love people like we should love you. We should really love you because you really represent the needs of the people. It's kind of like, I remember in Memphis, and one of my heroes is Ida B. Wells Barnett, but she never had the support of the people, including the black people in Memphis. They really, I mean, she was a school teacher here. They the ones that cost her job because she was too outspoken. But one thing she did understand when she understood is that, hey, you know, she would have been on the right side of history.
Right.
But she did what she had to do anyway, regardless of the unsupport of the people that she was trying to serve. And I feel like you to still be this woman that you're not dejected by how people did you, how people were used and betrayed you and stuff like that, and you're still doing the right thing. You should be commended for your service because it's very invaluable service. Like, when I look at you, I'm seeing like Mickey Leland, I'm seeing Adam Clay Powell Jr., I'm seeing Shirley Chisholm, I'm seeing George White, I'm seeing everybody that ever took a chance for us, even when we didn't believe we had a chance.
Even when we believe, that's right.
So I bless you. I mean, it really is an honor and a privilege. You don't know how much of an honor and a privilege it is for me to be talking to you on the phone. So maybe I'm kind of biased in that way, but I just think that you're doing a great job. And I'd like to get you, I know you wrote a very great article about Bhutto over in Pakistan.
Yes, and what I don't want is the situation to become further militarized with U.S. troops.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that this administration is trying to station troops and destabilize countries all over the world.
Right.
They are doing that with the complicity of the Democratic majority in the Congress. We cannot accept any more. No more war, period. So that's important. I would invite people to visit my website. I have several. One comprehensive website is allthingscynthiamckinney.com. And on that website, people can look at my legislative background, my congressional background. They can look at the campaigns that we've run. They can look at certain myths that have been put out there. And one young gentleman just decided, I'm going to debunk these myths.
Right.
And so there's the myth debunking. All of that is there on that allthingscynthiamckinney.com website. And then the presidential race, and there's also a link to runcynthiarun.org. Mm-hmm. And that talks about what we're doing now with the Green Party, trying to do something different so we can have something different.
I think I honored it because I think that our problem is that people got the issue in the world, it seems, is self-esteem.
Yes.
We got everybody, I don't care if you're black or white, rich or poor, got some type of issue with self-esteem, it seems. And the thing about it is, like, when you say Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican that ever elected, and he didn't even care the southern state. He actually broke up the Union.
Yes.
But he was the first Republican of many more coming after him. Unfortunately, he didn't think the same way he thought about certain things. But, I mean, he's got to start somewhere, and he got to start in believing. I think it's unfortunate. It was a missed opportunity. I talked to Dr. Marable about it, the black political convention in Gary, Indiana, back in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Something should have been done then, you know, because, we had a lot of respect for people like Charles Diggs and people like that, John Conyers, and we had Mary Baraka, and all these people from the diaspora with these different thoughts and ideologies getting together. We should have did something then, because Walter Mosley wrote a great, article about it in The Nation a couple of years ago, about getting some type of group together that has a black platform. But really, like the Black Panthers, as you already know, if you take care of black people's problems, you're taking care of everybody's problems.
Taking care of everybody's problems, that's right.
Yeah, but at the same time, we keep on missing the boat on that, and I think it's unfortunate that even I went to D.C. back in July, and it's like, talking to young people that actually work in the congressional halls and whatnot, and they don't have an idea about stuff. They don't even know what happened 10 years ago or 40, 50 years. I talk to people that work for certain people, they didn't know who Adam Clay Powell Jr. was. They wasn't a part of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Yes.
I ain't going to say no names.
That's a reflection on my generation.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't done the appropriate teaching. I will never forget that I was listening to a black-oriented, because it wasn't black-owned, call-in radio show and talk show, and the woman was complaining because her daughter did not know who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was. Mm-hmm. Well, now, that's not really a reflection on the school, although we extrapolate and say, well, in a distance, that might be a reflection on the school. That's a reflection on the mother.
Mm-hmm.
What are they talking about when they eat dinner together?
Or do they eat dinner together? You know how we do.
That's right. Things
are crazy. And I think that's very important to get back to that. How do you feel about that, the way the family is structured? You think the black people are in crisis as far as family mode in this country?
I think the black community is in crisis, from education to jobs to health care, all of the indices of quality of life. I think it's very clear that we are in crisis. I have long said that my opinion was that the black body politic was comatose. We, I believe, are on life support, and the darn tubes have been removed now.
Mm-hmm.
It's either we're going to breathe on our own, or we're not going to breathe at all.
Mm. And we have the luxury of, I just keep on thinking about stuff. I know this past year I did a trifecta of, I call them the Angry Black Man books. I read Invisible Man, I read The Miseducation of Negro, and I read The Spook That Sat by the Door.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, these books shouldn't be relevant. I don't think the authors of one of these books, if their books weren't relevant today, I think they would be happy because they showed some progress.
Yes, yes.
So I'm saying, why we keep on finding ourselves in the same, like you said, like, why can't we just try to breathe on our own? Why are we, do you think that we kind of had the wrong ideas about, I had talked to a woman, for example, that's 92 years old. Her grandfather was a former slave. She was a school teacher. She taught in the inner city schools in Memphis. And the school she taught at, kids were going to Harvard and Spelman and Howard. They were going everywhere. They had Tennessee Rhodes scholars. But she said Brown v. Board messed up everything because you took the talented temp out the neighborhood, out of an unsupported environment. Then the people that left behind feel like, why they must be special. Why do white folks like them better than like us? So she said now 50 years now later, to be smart is to be white, when 50 years ago to be smart was to be a credit to your race. Yeah. Because everybody was part of the community. Do you think that in a lot of ways we had misinterpreted the aims of Brown v. Board or what we should have been doing, quote unquote, post-segregation?
Well, I think it's clear that something went wrong, and I just recently came from Tulsa, and we remember that white people rioted and burned down all of the businesses that were owned by the blacks in Tulsa, who were among the nation's wealthiest people.
Mm-hmm.
Left to their own devices, Tulsa, Black Wall Street would have led the country in wealth and helped the country to achieve new heights of wealth.
Right.
The black community in Atlanta would have done the same thing along Auburn Avenue. So, you know, something was lost in the transaction, and I think the community lost an entire lot. For example, in Birmingham, Alabama, where my mother is from, all of the black people went to Parker High School. All the black people of a certain age went to Parker High School.
Mm-hmm.
And that high school education equipped them with the kind of, you talk about self-esteem, they had self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
They may not have had a dime
right.
in terms of income and money, but they had self-esteem. They had innate value. They understood that they had value, even when the surrounding community and the legal structure devalued them. And now we have what? The self-esteem problem when really we shouldn't.
Right.
We shouldn't. But look at the civil rights movement took black people who had no wealth, like the $850 billion that they say comes into our community
right.
here now, but they used whatever wealth they had and withdrew it from the system in the form of boycotts and changed the law. They didn't have the right to vote, but they used the strength of numbers to pressure the system to give them the right to vote. The right to vote was basically a sheet of paper that it took 218 votes in the House and 51 votes in the Senate to get passed, signed by the president. But you didn't have 40 black people in the Congress back then to help lead that legislation through. That legislation was pushed through Congress by the sheer force of the will of unity of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, the rectitude of the argument. That's what pushed the Voting Rights Act into law. So now we still have the potential to coordinate, to organize, to mobilize. We still have the moral arguments on our side to push this country to do the right thing for our community and for all other communities of distress.
Mm-hmm.
Will we do it? I certainly hope so. Am I trying to do everything I can to kickstart it? Yes, I absolutely am.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what I see unfolding. That's what I see unfolding, and I hope that we're able to kickstart the kind of movement in this country that would encourage young people to bring all of their talents together, run for office, take whatever that spirit is that we all have, take that into the community and share it with all of us.
That's great. And also, I'd like to ask you, when was the moment you knew that you were going to run for office?
Running for office was not something that I ever planned to do. It's certainly not anything I wanted to do. It just was something that happened to me. So I didn't go to school to run for office. So I don't want people to think that they have to have any kind of special education or anything like that. Life is preparation for public office and public life. And so you can do things from a variety of backgrounds and still find a place to express your dreams for your community and your dreams for your country in the political process.
I know, like, on your emails you have about the Bobby Kennedy or the Ted Kennedy quote, I think, about Bobby Kennedy, what he said about what can be. And I just think, like, Bobby Kennedy, he was a guy that was very impatient with the system, it seems. Even when he was, like, when his brother was around and he was Attorney General, he was a very impatient guy, it seems, but he got things done. And it seems like me, like, you got so many things that you're trying to do, but the system is the one really holding you back from doing these things. The compromises and trying to get the support and all this stuff. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it frustrating?
We all have our moments, right? And so, you know, every day is a challenge, but we can't lose hope. And certainly when I look at young people and I think about the doors of opportunity being open, if I move and do one more thing versus the doors of opportunity being closed, if I sit at home and do nothing, I want the doors of opportunity to be open for all of America's young people. And so, therefore, I have no choice. But as long as I can move, to move. And so that's why I act. It's why I dissent. That's, in fact, what Bobby Kennedy said. Was I'm going to, how much longer do we have? I've got a very important group of young men out here I need to see.
Oh, no, definitely. We won't have that much longer. I'd just like to thank you. And I want to know also when you decide to run for the presidency.
Are you going to splice this together? Because I really need to do this. I need to go.
Oh, yes, ma'am. That's fine. It's fine. It's all good. I really thank you for your time, Cynthia McKinney.
Yeah, just call me. If you're going to splice it together, you can call me back, and then you can add that. But I've really got to greet these young people who are...
Oh, yes, ma'am. I definitely don't keep our young people waiting. I really appreciate you giving us the time. I'm serious about that, and I really respect you so much. And I wish you well, and hopefully we can look up some things very soon in the near future to bring you here.
Okay. I'd love to come to Tennessee.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.